This was exactly at that point because this is when I realized that without having a diagnosis, I realized I needed to do things that I enjoyed that would allow me consistency to be able to see them through. Because I began to realize that things that I didn't enjoy, I would lose focus quickly. I
Mm.
would move on to a different topic, a different area, different subject, different job, or want to move on quickly to a different job. I would not focus perhaps in meetings. I would not.
So let's get real. Our value as doctors has significantly diminished over the last decade. So, how can we turn that around by upskilling and creating rewarding and impactful careers on our own terms? Welcome to Disrupting Doctors' Careers. I'm your host, Dr. Abeyna Bubbers-Jones, and I'm on a mission to connect 1 million talented doctors with the best in diverse career opportunities. Welcome to another episode of Disrupting Doctors' Careers, where we go down the pathway of what is it like to be neurodiverse and develop a really impactful alternative career, a diverse career in clinical and in industry. And to address this topic and to share his own experiences, I'm introducing many of you may already know him, Dr. Junaid Hussain, who is a GP out of hours, but he also has a flourishing industry career, consulting with a whole variety of digital health tech companies, as well as being the founder of Man Confidence, where they offer psychotherapy one-to-one. So really exciting. I'll tell us a bit more about that. But before we start, I want to say hello to everyone who has been listening to Disrupting Doctors' Careers for some time. And for those who are watching, I am currently at my parents' house on the floor. This is the first time I've done a podcast on the floor. Why am I telling you this? The reality is it's not all that glam. You just get into a room where you can record and just do it and have a conversation. And this is how we get things done. So I'm at my parents simply because I have kids and they occasionally like to go and see their grandparents. I'm so, so, so grateful that I have this diverse career so I can actually be flexible with my time and where I work. So yeah, I just wanted to share that with everyone listening. And again, like if you are coming from any background and you're looking for a diverse career yourself, do listen to this episode because one of the things that I've noticed, especially with my occupational health hat on, is that the prevalence, reporting of people being diagnosed with high functioning autism, especially I'm talking about specifically amongst medics, and ADHD has skyrocketed, right? The recognition of those conditions has skyrocketed. And there are a lot of doctors who are looking for help for themselves and also questioning because I am on the neurodiverse spectrum, am I actually right for this? Or which alternative career is right for me? Right. So that's probably another question you may be asking yourself if you're listening to this podcast episode. So let's talk neurodiverse. Let's talk impactful careers. Let's talk Junaid. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Abeyna. Thank you so much. Good to be
No
here.
worries. Well, let's start with you and your background. And let's talk like pre-diagnosis of ADHD and autism. Tell me more about how you developed your medical career and how that kind of led to you really kind of diversifying out.
So it's a very important question because um, I was diagnosed with ADHD and autism in 2022, so 2022. But without knowing it, I was impacted by it from a very young age. So obviously, this is a lifelong diagnosis. You've had it since birth, whether you know it or not, and it obviously impacts you in different ways. And with me, I suppose if I go right back to let's say school, it didn't have that much of an impact on me back then. So pre-university, I did very well in my A levels. I had a decent group of friends. My mind was a bit here or there, but I had a rigid routine. I'd go to school, come back home, mum and dad are there, and you got the food on the table, clothes ironed for you, everything's nice and comfortable. Life's very sort of organized. And I'll explain why this is important. You'll begin to understand why this story is important when I come into sort of the careers aspect shortly.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that side, all the routine, all the things you have in their life is fine. When you get to university onwards, and in my case in particular, and remember that ADHD, autism, they're both spectrum, so in terms of severity as well, and how much
Mm-hmm.
you're going to affect somebody. But in my case in particular, it had more of an impact when I was at university, without obviously realizing.
Mm.
So you're in a situation where the world is less organized, less structured, as it would be
Mm-hmm.
in university. Your mates might come around, say, let's watch a movie, or let's go out and do such and such. And things are not as rigid as they were when you're in that sort of school or younger life. Now that has its impact because, in particular, autistic spectrum disorder thrive. People with that thrive on routine and organization, whether it's conscious routine or unconscious routine. They thrive on that, and when that's not there, you lose that synchronization with the world and synchronization with your own emotions as well. So you become emotionally dysregulated, and this
Mm-hmm.
impacts your perception and your view of the world. Now, I'll give you an example before I get into the careers part of it, but I'll give you an example when I was at uni. Um, you go to a lecture, yeah, or a couple of lectures in the morning, for example, and you've got in a big hall full of loads of students and colleagues and whatever else, and you listen to a couple of lectures. I'd listen to a lecture or a couple of lectures, I'd go back home and I'd lie in bed for an hour trying to figure out what just happened in that lecture. So I spend an hour going back over the lectures in my
Kind of
head.
reprocessing it in your head, going at, but it's great that you
Yeah,
actually remembered it because I know I barely even remembered half of the lectures that I attended
yeah.
in
But,
reality.
but it's not even remembering the content. It's remembering
Mm.
the social interactions. What did he mean when he said that? What did she mean when she said that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
So the social
Mm.
aspect, as well as because social cues and social aspects are not intuitive to many people who have autistic spectrum disorder, which is
Mm-hmm.
weird because when you look at medics and I'm jumping topic here slightly, when you look at medics, we all know a medic here or there, especially through medical trainings in medical school, who's that doctor in hospital who's just a bit quirky, had that bow tie or whatever it is that they had, and it's just a bit quirky. And we just thought, okay, that's a quirky doctor. And if we're looking at a lens now, through the knowledge that we have of autistic spectrum disorder and ADHD, it may well be that clinician may have possibly been on the spectrum. I'm generalizing a little bit. But in any
Yeah.
case,
Yeah.
coming back to so I'm there lying in bed, staring up at the ceiling for an hour, trying to figure out what happened over the past 2 hours. I'm thinking everybody else is probably doing the same thing in their dorms as well. And obviously, it's just me staring up at the ceiling, figuring it out. Now, it's great when you're at uni because, again, you've got that bit of privacy to figure things out. When it gets to um, sort of post university, when you've got much longer shifts, there's even more uncertainty in the workplace. You're constantly getting beeped when
Yeah.
you're being sort of, when you've
Yeah.
got your leave due as
Multitasking,
well.
all of that
Yeah,
jazz. Yeah.
and then you're trying to process that day at the end of the day. But at the end of the day, you've also got with you a spouse, and you've also got with you children, and you've not got that 1 hour to lie down in bed, stare at the ceiling, and process things. Then the journey becomes much more of a roller coaster of emotions because you're struggling to, or I was at least struggling to manage those emotions and manage those and process those feelings. So when my early career, a lot of it was spent in, I'd say, an emotional roller coaster with ADHD and autism. With that, alongside that, various life events. So my mum, when pretty much as soon as I became a doctor, became very sick. Died
Mm.
a couple of years later.
Mm.
I had a son a couple of years after I became a doctor, who subsequently, back in 2019, I think it was diagnosed first with autistic spectrum disorder and ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
And his diagnosis impacted my diagnosis, and I could come on to that story if it's time as well. But in any case, my
Mm.
my first few years were up and down, and I enjoyed certain parts of being a doctor, and I hated certain parts of being a doctor.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
if I look back now through autistic spectrum disorder and ADHD, and I'm making an assumption here when I talk about ADHD and autism, that everyone will understand what I mean by that. By autistic spectrum disorders, often rigid thinking, struggling in social context, struggling to understand social situations, struggling to process
Mm-hmm.
bit of information, executive function.
Mm-hmm.
That impetus of wanting to do something that needs to get done, and processing and doing that we struggle with that
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in autism. In ADHD, there's the impulsive side, and there's the focus, the lack of focus side. So for me, the impulsivity, and I have both the impulsivity aspect and the lack of focus aspect. But
Mm.
my lack of focus side is helped by my autism, because I'm able to hyper focus on things that I enjoy.
Ah, interesting,
Yeah.
interesting. So they're
So
kind of
when it
working with each other, not necessarily against each other. I mean, I think it's really interesting, like how, without the diagnosis, you manage, we cope, we adapt, we're human beings, right? And it's only it comes to like when you look back post-diagnosis, actually, how much you really had to manage it, how much energy you were outputting to keep up with everyone else, which is really remarkable. And so I'd love to hear. I mean, when you diversified your career, was that pre or post diagnosis?
pre-diagnosis.
Okay, so
And
what led to you deciding, obviously
yeah,
having I'm jumping forward here deliberately, but getting into GP, working out of hours, when did you decide actually I need something more? I could do something more than just clinical work.
this was exactly at that point, because this is when I realized that without having a diagnosis, I realized I needed to do things that I enjoyed, that would allow me consistency to be able to see them through. Because I
Mm-hmm.
began to realize that things that I didn't enjoy, I would lose focus quickly. I
Mm-hmm.
would move on to a different topic, a different area, a different subject, different job, or want to move on quickly to a different job. I would not focus perhaps in meetings. I would not focus perhaps in learning. And so I realized at that point that I need to have a job that has significant or enough variety for me to keep me interested, but also at the same time be able to manage my and regulate myself. So, as an example, I really loved A&E as a rotation. I absolutely loved a accident and emergency. I thought it was a brilliant, so much variety, and you don't know what the next patient's going to have. You have to really engage your mind. But because of the struggle with sleep and because of the way the shift pattern work was, I couldn't cope with it because it would affect my emotional regulation. So that ruled that out as a career for me. And then subsequently, when looking across the breadth of different careers, I felt that general practice was one that both brought both variety, but also brought that stability from a
Mm-hmm.
mental health perspective that allowed me. So that was general practice in a broader sense. That gave me the platform as well and it's quite common, I think, for a lot of GPs to see or people to see general practice as a platform to begin to diversify
Yeah,
their careers.
yeah.
It gives us stability. You can work part-time. You can choose your hours to some extent or another. It's changed a bit now, but to some
Mm-hmm.
extent or
Mm-hmm.
another. Yeah, so that's what happened. So I did my GP training up in Manchester for 3 years. And then I locumed as a GP, primarily working in GP in A&E, but also GP out of hours, so all that urgent care. So I had that A&E urgent care type of aspect that I really enjoyed, but also I was
Mm-hmm.
able to control to some extent or another the hours and the type of work that I did,
Mm-hmm.
rather than, let's say, a standard clinic,
Mm.
basing the standard 34 how many
Yeah.
patients a day.
So you already had that autonomy in the type of work that you were doing.
Mm.
I assume like maybe consciously or subconsciously that was so you could manage your
Completely
time that
subconscious,
suited you.
completely subconscious.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
it was just something that I didn't consciously decide that this is something I wanted. It just fell into that, and my mind
Hmm.
just wanted it. Yeah.
No, that's interesting. And so how did you get into digital health and start consulting on
So
that
okay, so
level?
this is another. Not, it's a long story. I'll keep it short. So what
Yeah.
happened immediately after my I locumed for a year and a bit in the sort of Manchester Liverpool region. Then I
Mm.
went abroad. I worked in Saudi Arabia for 3 years
Mm.
as a GP, and that was really really interesting. And this is again part of the diversifying sort of careers aspect. And I would recommend, or say, to anybody who's working in as a clinician, as a doctor, to consider working abroad at some point, even if it's for a short period of time, because it really broadens your horizons.
I
And
mean, this is how Medic Footprint started. I went and worked in South Africa. I know everyone likes to go to Oz, Australia,
mm,
but I was like, I need something different
mm,
because, and South Africa really took me outside of my comfort zone in a great way, in a remarkable way. And that's actually, it was the first steps for me actually co-founding, starting Medic
mm,
Footprints. It was just realizing the breadth of opportunities outside of clinical practice, even being in a different country, clinical practice is different, right? So yeah, I totally echo that. I totally echo that.
mm.
But yeah,
I,
why did you choose Saudi in particular?
so I was, to be honest, for me there were a few different reasons. I think I think my ADHD side was getting making me a bit bored of ordinary primary care, and I wanted to do something different. And
Hmm.
at the same time, I wasn't really that happy being in the UK at that moment in time. It's interesting considering the times we're in at the moment, because around that time was Brexit. So
Hmm.
around that time, there's a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment going on, and I didn't like that. And I didn't like I'd come back from work, and then I'd hear unfortunately, from my spouse, what happened in the street that day, and someone had said something, and so on. And I just thought, why should I be in such a circumstance? Why should I allow this to happen to myself and to my family? So that's the brutal, honest sort of reason. I thought I had to leave the UK at that moment in time to both for my own sort of my own personal interest, as in I want to do something a bit different, but also because the environment at the time was quite hostile, and I thought this opportunity came up, and let's take it, and let's see what happens with it. Let's run with it, and let's see what happened. It was really really good. The 3 years was a very very good experience. I worked both in the governmental sector and the private sector, and I did
Hmm.
things there that I would never do in the UK. There were just opportunities that would for learning
Hmm.
and for experience that would just never come up in ordinary medical practice in the UK, sadly,
Hmm.
because for
Hmm.
various different reasons which I can go into if you like, but yeah, or that I have opinions about, at least for why it occurs. But yeah, I
Mm.
had many wonderful things that and times that I spent there.
Yeah. So I think that's really interesting, and I totally agree that a lot of people do get pushed out of this country, don't they, because of what's going on. And I think it's really sad, but you were there for a number of years. You came back, digital health. I mean, it clearly opened doors for you in that sense.
Yeah,
Would you like to just
yeah,
outline like how that experience in Saudi led to you actually getting into digital health
yeah,
and
absolutely.
consulting in that
Absolutely. So,
level?
so, in Saudi Arabia, I was involved. I set up a GP training program from scratch or family medicine, as is known in the area, in a desert city called Hail in the north of Saudi, covering a population of about 300,000 people. By the time I left, they had 32 trainees across 4 separate training years. I was invited by government essentially to get involved in policy making, in vaccinations and education, diabetes programs across the country, and so on. So these are things that where you're involved in leadership roles, and you're seeing things through a different lens to what you would do, and your opinions are really valued, and it was really something that I enjoyed very much. And even in the private sector, I was involved in tenders worth millions of pounds, putting in clinical input on those tenders for operating centres, things you wouldn't even dream of doing as a clinician in the UK. And for us, it's next patient. Can you go faster, doctor? Can you see more,
Hmm.
doctor?
Hmm.
And it's not over there. You're valued for more than that. So when I was there, one thing I found was that I lacked certain skills that I wasn't given in training whilst in the UK. So I went started an MBA, and that pushed the entrepreneurial and innovation bug in me. So when I
Hmm.
came back to the UK, um, I came back with a completely different lens of looking at things. So when I sit in a clinic, for example, I wouldn't sit in a clinic and think, or in a healthcare center, I wouldn't sit and think, right, I've got 32 patients in front of me. I automatically start thinking, right, there's 15 rooms in this building, so many are occupied, so many are unoccupied. What could be done with this? And what about that? And the flow of patients is this. And And I was looking at it from much more from a
Yeah.
operational perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that whole perspective is what led me towards digital health. So that whole perspective change is what changed my own view of what's important to get healthcare better from where it is
Hmm.
now to where it needs to be in my
Yeah.
own in my own vision of things and perspective of things.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely. And I think it is that mindset. It's that change in perspective, mindset shift, realizing that as a clinician, you are part of you are actually a small part of a much greater system. And there are so many other areas where you can actually make a bigger change, right? Quite
Mm,
a larger, impactful, influential difference.
mm,
And so doing that MBA, having that experience in Saudi, it sounds like it really paved the way for you, as you described, like to diversify, but also for opening other opportunities, having the entrepreneurial mindset, seeing the gaps in the market and really taking it. So actually, so that's my next question, because a lot of people may have had that change in perspective, seeing
mm.
other opportunities, but obviously what sets you apart from a lot of people, to be honest, is the fact that you actually took action. And so my question is, how why did you take action? And do you feel that your like, the background in neurodiversity had anything to do with it?
Yeah, yeah. The second question, yes, definitely.
Hmm.
Why? So when I came back, obviously, seeing the NHS the way it was
Mm.
frustrating to see because there were very simple changes that I could see could be done that would make a big impact, whether it's in a small GP practice, whether it's a larger scale. And it was very frustrating because there was no outlet for my voice to be heard, and no outlet for me to really give an opinion. Well, that's what it felt like anyway. And rightly or wrongly, I could be very wrong about this. I felt a little bit at the time that my own sort of racial background, I suppose, my background, Southeast Asian, and as a Muslim man, probably makes it even more prohibitive for me to be able to get my voice heard.
Hmm.
So I got to a point where I was on LinkedIn and I see all these different posts about how amazing digital health is and how amazing these amazing products were. And I look at the products and I think, God, these are awful. These are awful. I don't see any benefit in these. And why is everybody so rose tinted about this digital health thing? And I got to a stage where I thought, do I say something about this or not? Or do I just, click the like button or the clap button like everybody else does? And well done and great and yay and you're amazing. And I just thought, what do I have to lose? I literally just thought, what do I have to lose? No one listens to me anyway, and no one's going to listen to me anyway. I may as well just shove my thoughts out there, whether people like it or not. Now, I'm slightly more careful now. Now I'm a bit more balanced, I suppose. I'm on medication, should we say, and I'm a bit more emotionally regulated than I was back then.
But
But
I'm going to jump in there. I'm going to jump in there because like we see a lot of doctors, and I forgot to mention in the beginning that you're a great LinkedIn poster. I have to say his content is, you have to follow Junaid, who's saying, everyone, you have to follow him. That's all I can say. Anyway, there are a lot of people that go on LinkedIn, and we know there's a lot of crap on LinkedIn. There's a lot of content, a lot of crap, and as you would expect. I mean, I love LinkedIn, don't get me wrong, but
mm,
when you put out a platform that's for everyone and anything,
yeah,
like the quality does vary, and we know LinkedIn has its algorithms to choose some certain posts over others
mm,
anyway. But there is this fear for most people, especially when they're new to the platform,
mm,
to worry about what people are going to say or think about what they're putting out there, and the fact that they put something out there and everyone's going to go, "Oh, that's rubbish."
mm,
You know what I? But I mean, we say this in the fellowship, the Doctors in Industry Fellowship. The reality is, especially if you don't really have any followers, like hardly anyone's going to see your post. No one's going to care. No one's
mm,
going to remember. Unless
yeah,
it is a really, really good post, in which, say, in case people will comment, people will engage, people will,
yeah,
so if it's a bad post, no one's going to see it anyway. It doesn't matter.
yeah,
Like basically. And I think it's really important for everyone to have that mindset, especially when you're at the beginning of that journey. And
yeah,
it's great that you had that mindset, but also saw, I am not going to follow the train that everyone else says yes and loves this and validates
yeah,
this. You are going to stand out and have your own unique opinion. And actually, that is what LinkedIn is for.
mm,
That is what the LinkedIn platform actually it LinkedIn, what's it called? It empowers creators. I say
mm,
empower, I'm trying to think of the word, empowers creators. And for those kind of polarizing voices, as in
mm,
the voices that stand out and not saying the same as everyone else, it rewards that stuff. It rewards that type of content. And this is how people go viral because they're doing something different from everyone else that's attracting attention. So I think it's great that you decided fuck it, I'm just going to write what I think because actually
mm.
that's what the platform wants.
And my intention was never to be necessarily to be controversial. My intention was just to be honest, in terms of
But even honesty
yeah,
is polarizing,
yeah,
right?
it can
Who
be,
says what they really think these days?
exactly, and there are. I mean, I look at things obviously from the lens of my own experience and my own background, and I'm willing to accept, from time to time I may be wrong, but there's people on there who just post, as you mentioned, crap, so often. I just think, before I click the, the send or post button, I'm just there thinking, is my thought here any more crap than the post of the other person who is posting their stuff? And I think probably not. It's probably equally crap or maybe slightly less crap. So just click the post button and let's see if people resonate with it or not. And that's what people resonated with. And I grew very fast as a result. I had a newsletter, which I've not really updated for a while. I had a newsletter, and I think within a few weeks, I had over 1,500 people signing up to it. It was a very
Wow.
sarcastic newsletter. I didn't really leverage the power of that in any way. I didn't. I was a bit naive at the time in terms of seeing how fast it was growing. But people valued the sarcastic sort of tone that I'd used in the newsletter, and it was a refreshing sort of take for them. But yeah, but in any case, for me, it was very much about look. This is what I think needs to be done in healthcare. Look, this is from my experience what works. This is what I don't think will work. I don't think this product is as good without necessarily naming and shaming. I don't think it's nice to everyone wants to do well in and trying to, everyone goes into healthcare generally being altruistic. So I don't want to knock anybody for their efforts, but sometimes you don't want certain products to get through, which are going to inhibit other products that are better. Um, and
Mm.
and so I without sort of naming and shaming necessarily, I give my opinions about whether it's AI, whether it's the latest fad, in whatever, whether it's a particular type of technology, and looking at it from a holistic perspective. And I think
Mm.
that's what people and that's what companies valued, and that's why I was essentially more or less approached to an extent, uh, by companies to work with them.
Yeah, no, I'd love to hear more about that because I think one of the it's great to hear that you did leverage LinkedIn
Mm,
as a platform to amplify your voice
mm,
and your thought leadership and your credibility and your honest opinion, and that's essentially how you developed your mark in digital health without actually like a lot of doctors come over and say, how do I want to get to digital health? How do I get a job in digital health?
mm,
You weren't jobbing in digital health, but you were still in the industry by really elevating yourself and having a voice. And then as we also we support doctors in developing their personal brand in the fellowship, but you want to get to a point where people are coming to you for advice and you're
mm,
being paid for that
mm,
advice. Like actually, our last podcast was how do you move from giving free advice to
mm,
paid advice? So I'd love to hear from you when you were approached. What did that look like? And how did that translate to actually getting work?
yeah. So it's very much a message through LinkedIn. Eventually, I got my own website, and I created my own sort of Dr. Junaid, literally drjunaidsane.com. Not a very creative name, but it's that's a personal website that I
Mm,
have. But prior to that, it was just a message through LinkedIn. You
mm.
know,
And like what
uh,
kind of things did people say? And I'm deep
yeah.
diving here. What did they say? What did that look like?
Yeah, so they're like, no, we really resonated with your post. Thank you so much for posting that. It's what we're thinking, or not many people say this, but you're right.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Interestingly, the same people didn't like the post or comment on the post. So it's that group of people
Yeah,
who
yeah, yeah. I get a lot of that.
it's a group of
Yeah,
people
there's
who
so many
contact you, are those.
watchers.
Yeah, they sort of watch you from a distance,
Yeah,
and they don't want to get involved in the controversy, which is fair enough. But
yeah.
then they'll write to you in the background, and then they'll say, "Look, can I have some of your thoughts on X, Y, Z?" And the thing with me is, I'm honest from the beginning, and I say, "Look, I've got a limited amount of time in the day. I have to juggle, like many other people, my other responsibilities, my responsibilities at home and so on. So I'm from the get-go, I say, look, if it's consultancy work, but you're looking at in terms of your product, I charge X amount of money, or I will be charging for it. I'm happy to have an initial conversation, but anything more than that, we need to be charged because I put a value on my time, and it's very, very important,
Mm.
and on my thought. And when I do give advice, it's very honed and it's very to the point, and
Mm.
and I believe it's very, very impactful.
And I want
So
everyone to listen to this in particular. I think this is key, and I'm only stopping you just because, again, I'm on this great mission for doctors to recognize the value of who they are as a
mm,
doctor, the value of their advice, the value of what they not only bring in their day-to-day clinical work, but also in industry, and actually how to articulate your value by
mm.
setting your standards, creating those standards and being clear on them up front. And I think a lot of the challenges that doctors face is that they just don't know how to do that. Because like, why would we? We've never really had to.
each doctor
And yeah,
each doctor, no matter what the background, neurodiversity or not,
yeah,
has some experience that's valuable to somebody somewhere. And the more experience you get with time, and the more honed experience you get with time, and the more you understand different principles, whether it's management or leadership or entrepreneurship or innovation, the more you'll be able to leverage that experience that you've had
absolutely, absolutely.
towards industry. So my MBA helped me to understand innovation landscapes, and entrepreneurship and commercialization and the importance of health economics and so on. Some of my learning came from literally listening to podcasts
Yeah.
around health technology. I've always said it. James Summeru, I think everyone knows him. I'm a very big fan of him, and a lot of my learning came from literally driving to work, listening to a podcast about industry,
Mm-hmm.
and taking from that lessons that I wouldn't have otherwise. So in any case, translating that into into when people came or companies came to me and said, look, can we have a chat about our product XYZ? I'd be very honest with them. If it's something where I didn't have the requisite experience, I'd say, look, it's probably beyond me. I'm really glad you like my posts, but the specifics of cancer, genes, and whatever it is that you're doing, I can't help with because I'm a generalist. I'm not a specialist, and I direct them elsewhere. Or if it's about a specific aspect of regulation, obviously I have a network within LinkedIn, and I say, look, not me, but somebody else might be more suitable for you. But where it was something where I knew I could make an impact, I said, look, I know I can help you with this. I know where you need to
Mm-hmm.
go with this. I know what needs to be done here to go from where you are to where you need to be. And that can be very, very impactful. Let's have a
Mm.
chat and let's go through this. And that led to many, many opportunities with
Mm.
various different companies over the years. And most recently, I think culminating only just recently, last month or two, I came off the end of Warwick Innovation District round, which was where I work as an out of hours GP called Badger. I work with them and an organization called UHUK, which is a umbrella group of social enterprise out of hours organizations, alongside the Warwick Innovation District, Warwick
Mm-hmm.
University,
Mm-hmm.
at an innovation a innovation round, also over a period of about 10 months, innovating in urgent care alongside different
Mm.
organizations, working with C-suite, people in C-suite, people who have facilitated it, and industry as well. That wouldn't have come about except that I made my opinions, uh, put my opinions out there on LinkedIn. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
interestingly enough, my employer, well, essentially my employer, the people who work with out of hours, saw that and saw that I had that
Mm.
interest, and that I had that interest where other clinicians perhaps they do or they don't, I don't know, but they've not mentioned that they have that interest. So they grabbed me and say that you're good at digital health technology, health strategy. Why don't we grab you and why don't you do this for us?
Absolutely. Did they pay you for that? Did they pay you extra?
Yeah, of
Good.
course. Yeah. No,
Because I see a lot of people because I mean it's great that you built so what you described, you've built your own personal brand, right, outside of your clinical
mm,
capacity. And we see this all the time. As a result, you've then gotten noticed by the people that you're working with anyway,
mm,
who have then
yeah,
brought you into other projects and opened up
exactly.
new opportunities. Doctors don't realize that that's possible and that happens all the time. Like they
Mm,
say, want to get into industry, you're looking outwards, but you need to really develop yourself personally so people know who you are, what you do and the value you provide. And just by word of mouth, an opportunity could land on your lap without you having to move anywhere. So I think that's a
And
really great story
yeah.
to share. I'm just quite mindful for time. And so the last question I have for you is, as we know that, there's an increasing number of doctors with neurodiversity, but we also know there's an increasing number of doctors who are really passionate about developing their careers outside of clinical.
Mm.
What advice would you give in particular to those who have a neurodiverse background, who are worried about the impact that their neurodiverse background may have on their opportunities and capacity, not only to work, say, for a company, but also working for themselves? What tips would you offer in that sense?
I'd go back one step, and
Mm,
to what I mentioned right at the beginning is if you have a new diagnosis or you suspect you're neurodivergent, work on that first, especially if it's impacting you. Because get that in order, and then get your understanding about yourself in order, or get your dysregulated mood or dysregulated self in order. Because once that's controlled, you can leverage it a lot better. You can harness the strengths that come from neurodiversity in terms of creativity, I think out of the box thinking, and that you can then use towards your career. So I would say, firstly, if you're not in a mentally in the right state, which can happen with being neurodiverse, try to get a grip of that first if you're able to. For me, that was very, very important. If I'd have carried on the way I was earlier on in my career, I'd be all over the place still. And I would have probably set up 5 different businesses right now, and 4 of them would have failed, and I'll be on to my next one at the end of this call. So it's yeah,
that's
so
not
that's the
such a
first thing.
bad thing, and I know realistically we know a lot of founders who do that, and
Yeah.
that's considered normal, and actually for a good reason, because we know that most
Yeah.
businesses fail.
It's good, but it's also bad because you're spinning a lot of plates and you're struggling to manage life in a controlled manner. If you're a single person with no other commitments, great, fine. You've got all the hours in the world to do it. If you've got a family or children or other commitments, and you're spinning multiple plates, that can be very, very difficult, and it can wear you down and ultimately can burn you out. So that's why, and autistic burnout is a recognized sort of syndrome or recognized condition as well. So yeah, so that's the first thing. But then on top of that, this is a difficult question to answer because I'm very, very lucky. So the where I work, and I've mentioned to them that I'm neurodiverse, and they have been very welcoming and and so in their approach and supportive and understanding, and they've allowed me to harness my strengths to a large extent. Uh, there's a lot of catching up to be done in much of industry about
Mm,
neurodiversity, and I wouldn't necessarily say it's right for you to disclose that, or it's on an individual basis as to whether you want to disclose that or not. Because for some people, for some organizations, the way they look at people, unfortunately, is okay, neurodiverse, therefore they come with a list of problems, therefore that's going to impact the way they work with us. So that's sad, but it's unfortunate, it's a reality, it will change. But it's something for us as neurodiverse to be aware of. Um, it's normal with neurodiversity to want to seek to do more or do more beyond what's run of the mill. And it's important in your career and in your career development to give yourself that objective and to work towards that and to harness your skills towards that, whether it's within the current place you work as almost like an entrepreneur, so asking for
hmm
for different projects, but don't, for God's sake, don't do for free. Make sure there's something at the end of it for you. Don't
hmm
don't give freebies away because no one's going to be grateful for you, unfortunately. And
Yeah, it's quite difficult to come back from free, isn't it?
yeah, exactly.
Because no one's
And it
valuing
doesn't
you at
doesn't pay the
free.
bills.
Does
Um,
not pay
or,
the
or whether it's,
bills.
or whether it's externally, and like I said, you can do it in sort of the way that I did, and I'm still very much on that journey as well. You can, in terms of getting yourself and your brand out there. But yeah, if you feel that there's more to be done in your career, more you want to achieve, and you've got that nagging voice, just do it. What's the worst that's going to happen? Think about it. Well, what's the worst that's going to happen in terms of putting yourself out there, or in terms of applying for a job, or there's someone will say no, or someone will not click like on LinkedIn, but it doesn't matter. Work towards what fulfills you,
Yeah.
uh, personally, and you'll get sort of true happiness and true sort of success, internal success out of that.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really great place to end because actually, the majority of our community, and this is the reality of it, and this came out of the survey, at least 60 to 70% of doctors are wanting to move, considering moving, but just not doing anything, not really taking steps. Like they might listen to the podcast or read on
Mm,
newsletter, but taking steps to actually do something, it takes years. And sometimes I always reflect on this and say, I wonder, is it the fear of actually achieving that fulfillment that may be holding
mm,
people back? The fear of that
mm,
actually possibly actually happening
mm,
because you've been so used to a way of living, a way of thinking, a way of being treated for so long. It's that fear and uncertainty that comes with change that I think, is a stressor in itself, right? Thinking my occupational health hat on. So I totally echo what you said. And like, what's the worst that can happen? The worst is that you actually achieve what you want to achieve. You
mm,
achieve the life you want to achieve, the
mm,
income you want to achieve, the fulfillment, more time with your family, more flexibility, whatever that is. It is possible. It
mm,
is possible, but it won't be possible if you don't take steps to actually see
mm,
it through. And it's scary. It's not easy. We're talking about it here. It's
mm,
not super easy. There are lots of challenges and obstacles along the way, like you've heard from Junaid today. But the journey is absolutely worth it. And yes, failure is part of it. If you fail, you're winning.
mm.
If you fail, you're winning. Don't forget that. But anyway, thank you so much for sharing your journey, your life, your background, your insights, especially with a neurodiverse background. I don't think we've actually talked about it specifically on this podcast before. But you this really helps open up opportunities just from the inspiration of you being you and
Mm.
having achieved what you've achieved to the last few years, if not your life. So I want to thank you so much, Junaid. And for anyone that wants to reach out to you, what's the best way of doing that?
LinkedIn. I live on LinkedIn, so just type in Dr. Junaid saying you'll find me there.
Yeah.
That's the best way to contact me. Drop me a message or yeah, interact with me there. I tend not to be on any other social media so much. Maybe I should do, but LinkedIn is the place to find me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Meta, but I'm really a LinkedIn girl, and even that, I definitely have taken a bit of a break recently. It is very difficult to do well on all platforms. So
Mm.
especially if you're someone that's got ADHD, I would say just stick with one platform, just one, and just
Well,
do
and
well with
one
it.
one note that I just remembered that for
Mm,
me, very much LinkedIn is I mean, there has been some deliberate in terms of posting and developing my sort of career or brand. Some of it is literally just me getting my thoughts out, and the reason I use LinkedIn is because I just enjoy it. Sometimes I just enjoy posting
mm,
something, and if it's a platform that you enjoy using, you're more likely to use it more regularly. You're more
yeah,
likely to engage with it more regularly. Therefore, you're more likely to grow and be seen as well. And then that
yeah,
seeing allows you to
absolutely,
grow. So yeah, just follow
absolutely.
something that you enjoy.
Absolutely. And for anyone who is thinking, hey, I want to do that, I want to do Junaid, I want to be what he's achieved and more, then as you're probably aware, we have our Doctors in Industry Fellowship where we are just about to open. If you go to medicfootprints.org/industry, you'll find out more information. But thank you so much. And I'm sure that we'll hear from you again soon. Take care.
Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you for having me.
No worries.